You close your bedroom door tonight without thinking about it. Now imagine a different scene. It's 50,000 BC. The sun just went down. There's no door. There's no privacy at all, really. Just a fire, the people you trust, and smoke curling up into the dark. And at some point, one of your ancestors looked at that smoke and thought something strange. What if I did that on purpose? This is the story of how smoking began. Not cigarettes. Not the modern habit you already know. The very first time a human being intentionally breathed in something burning, and why that decision might be one of the oldest choices your species ever made. Because here's what nobody tells you. Smoking doesn't start with tobacco. It doesn't start with trade routes or ceremonies or even agriculture. The pull toward inhaling smoke might be older than civilization itself. And the evidence is stranger than you'd expect. Before smoke, there was fire. And fire has been part of your story for a very long time. The oldest confirmed evidence of controlled fire use comes from Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, dating back roughly 1 million years. Archaeologists found burnt plant ash and charred bone, not from a wildfire, but from a contained fire used deliberately inside a cave. 1 million years ago, you weren't even Homo sapiens yet. That was Homo erectus. Smaller brain, heavier brow, same basic instinct to gather around warmth in the dark. They cooked. They stayed warm. They breathed smoke. Every single day, for hundreds of thousands of years, every ancestor who sat near a fire inhaled it. It was unavoidable. But not all of that smoke was the same. When organic matter burns, it doesn't just release carbon dioxide and water vapor. It releases a cocktail of compounds depending on what's burning. Some plants, when they combust, release psychoactive chemicals. Alkaloids. Terpenes. Compounds that interact with the human nervous system in ways that are, let's say, noticeable. Which means some of your ancestors were almost certainly getting accidentally high around the campfire. And they had no idea why they felt different. This isn't a fringe idea. Researchers have proposed for decades that early humans living in forested environments would have regularly been exposed to smoke from psychoactive plants growing naturally across Africa, Europe, and Asia. Your brain has receptors that respond to cannabinoids. Not because of cannabis specifically. They're part of your endocannabinoid system, which regulates mood, memory, and appetite. But because those receptors already existed, the first time someone inhaled smoke from a burning psychoactive plant, their brain wasn't confused. It recognized something. That accidental moment, repeated enough times, might be the true origin of smoking. Not a plan. A pleasant accident, recreated on purpose. Now here's where the timeline gets careful, because ancient humans being exposed to smoke and ancient humans intentionally cultivating something to smoke are two very different claims. The oldest direct evidence of intentional cannabis use comes from a burial site in the Pamir Mountains of Central Asia, dating to around 500 BC. Archaeologists found wooden braziers containing superheated stones, alongside residue from cannabis with unusually high THC content. Not wild hemp grown for fiber. The good stuff. Placed deliberately in a ritual burial. That's 2,500 years ago. But here's the question worth sitting with. Does the absence of older evidence mean it didn't happen earlier? Or does it just mean it hasn't survived? Organic material rarely lasts. Stone tools survive for millions of years because stone is nearly indestructible. A wooden pipe filled with dried herbs is gone within centuries. So absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. There's also the Herodotus problem. The Greek historian, writing in the 5th century BC, described the Scythians, a nomadic people from the Eurasian steppe, setting up small tents, heating stones until they glowed, and throwing hemp seeds onto them. They sat inside, inhaling the smoke, and as Herodotus wrote, howling with pleasure. For centuries, historians assumed he was exaggerating. Then archaeologists excavated Scythian burial mounds and found bronze braziers, heated stones, and hemp residue. Exactly what he described. He wasn't embellishing. If anything, he was underselling it. Tobacco is the one most people associate with smoking. But tobacco is native to the Americas, completely unknown to Europe, Africa, or Asia until contact in the late 15th century. When Columbus arrived in the Caribbean in 1492, his crew noticed something strange. Indigenous people walking around with small glowing sticks, inhaling smoke and releasing it through their noses and mouths. His crew was baffled. His crew also tried it themselves within weeks. Of course they did. But tobacco use in the Americas goes back much further than 1492. Chemical residue in ancient pipes has been found dating back at least 3,500 years in the southeastern United States. Some researchers believe it could go back 10,000 years or more, tied to cultivation in the Amazon basin. And here's the part that changes the meaning of all of it. Tobacco in ancient America wasn't recreational. It was sacred. Used in healing rituals, in communication with the spirit world, in binding agreements between tribes. Blowing smoke on someone was an act of blessing. A shaman who smoked wasn't taking a break. He was opening a channel. The smoke itself was treated as a living messenger, carrying prayers upward and bringing visions back down. That's why it was so disciplined. So ritualized. When something is sacred, you treat it with reverence. You don't do it absent-mindedly while staring at a screen. The idea of smoking as a casual, everyday habit is a relatively recent European invention. Now go back even further, to a piece of evidence most people have never heard. In 2019, researchers excavating in the Great Salt Lake Desert in Utah found a hearth roughly 12,000 years old, containing the seeds of Nicotiana attenuata, a wild tobacco species native to North America. The seeds weren't accidental. They were concentrated, placed in a way that suggests deliberate use. This predates any known pottery or pipe artifacts in the region by thousands of years. Which raises a real question. If people were placing tobacco into fires 12,000 years ago, what were people doing with their own local psychoactive plants in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in Australia at the same time? Because the desire to alter consciousness is not an American phenomenon. It's a human one. There's a theory worth taking seriously here. The intoxication hypothesis. Across nearly every human culture ever documented, people have sought out ways to alter consciousness. Fermented drinks. Psychedelic mushrooms. Smoke. Chewed leaves. This pattern is so universal, so independent across unconnected cultures, that some researchers believe it isn't incidental. Ronald Siegel, a psychopharmacologist at UCLA, proposed in the 1980s that the pursuit of intoxication functions as a fourth drive, alongside hunger, thirst, and reproduction, embedded not just in human behavior, but in animal behavior generally. Elephants seek out fermented marula fruit. Reindeer in Siberia eat Amanita muscaria mushrooms, then drink the urine of other reindeer who already ate them, because the psychoactive compounds pass through intact. If this drive runs that deep, it's entirely reasonable that early humans, long before pottery or pipes, were deliberately exposing themselves to smoke from psychoactive plants because they had learned, through experience, that it changed something. This was trial and error. High stakes. Sometimes fatal. But the ones who survived remembered. They told others. And that knowledge passed down, not through writing, but through lived experience, spoken around a fire in the dark. There's something that rarely gets discussed in this story. Smoking as medicine. Long before it was recreational. Long before it was spiritual. It may have been medical. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest known medical documents, dates to ancient Egypt around 1550 BC. It describes treatments involving the inhalation of smoke from heated herbs, specifically for conditions affecting the throat and lungs. The specific herbs used, including henbane, do have real pharmacological effects when inhaled. The ancient Greeks practiced fumigation regularly. Hippocrates himself wrote about inhaling herbal vapors to treat lung conditions. The logic wasn't unreasonable for the time. Smoke reaches the lungs directly. If a plant has medicinal properties, smoke is a fast way to deliver them. You still use this principle today. Inhalers. Anesthetic gases. Nebulizers. The delivery method survived. The burning part, thankfully, mostly didn't. Ancient Indian Ayurvedic medicine, dating back over 3,000 years, describes a practice called dhumapana, literally smoke drinking, involving medicinal herbs inhaled through pipes for specific conditions, with detailed protocols refined over centuries. Across ancient China, Mesopotamia, Greece, and India, smoke was used deliberately as medicine. Not because people were addicted. Because it worked, often enough, in a world without antibiotics or surgery. There's one more angle worth considering. Social bonding. You evolved in groups. Group cohesion was not optional. It was survival. Isolated individuals died. Groups lived. Shared rituals, including shared consumption of psychoactive substances, are powerful tools for social trust. When a group undergoes an altered experience together, it creates a kind of connection that's hard to build any other way. Modern neuroscience backs this up. Shared rituals synchronize neural activity and measurably increase trust and group identity. So when ancient humans sat together in a closed space, breathing in smoke and entering an altered state together, that wasn't simply recreation. It was infrastructure. The kind of trust that let people face danger together and come back alive. Here's the uncomfortable part of the story. The transition from sacred smoke to casual habit did not go well. When tobacco arrived in Europe in the 16th century, it spread fast. By the 1600s it was being traded globally. By the 1700s, snuff was fashionable across European aristocracy. By the 1800s, cigars were everywhere. By the early 1900s, the industrially manufactured cigarette had been invented, making tobacco cheaper, more convenient, and more addictive than anything before it. What had taken indigenous cultures thousands of years to develop into a careful, ritualized practice became, in the hands of industrialists, a mass-market product within 4 centuries. The tobacco industry spent decades suppressing internal evidence that cigarettes caused cancer. They marketed to children. They engineered chemical compounds specifically to make nicotine hit faster and harder. A shaman and a tobacco executive both worked with the same plant. They had almost nothing else in common. So when did your ancestors start smoking? Honestly, you may never know exactly. The physical evidence takes you back 12,000 years with real confidence, and possibly much further with reasonable speculation. But the underlying drive, the desire to alter consciousness, to share ritual experience, to use smoke as medicine, is almost certainly older than any artifact ever found. It may be as old as fire itself. It may be as old as the cognitive leap that made you human in the first place. The ability to connect cause and effect. To look at a burning plant and think, last time, I felt different. Let me do that again. That's not addiction. That's intelligence. What's clear is this. By the time written history begins anywhere in the world, humans were already finding ways to bring smoke into their bodies. The specific plants changed. The rituals changed. The purposes changed. But the behavior was already ancient by the time anyone thought to write it down. There's something almost moving about that. For everything that separates you from your ancestors, the technology, the medicine, the noise of modern life, there's a thin thread running unbroken through 100,000 years. Fire. Smoke. Breath. The oldest humans sat around fires and breathed the same smoky air you might smell at a bonfire tonight. Next time you catch a whiff of wood smoke on a cold evening, you're touching something far older than you realize. You're doing what humans have always done. You're breathing.